Hello everybody and welcome to another video. As you'd be able to tell in the title, we are going to be doing another power rankings video today. Obviously I did one at the end of round 5 and also at the end of round 10, so I'm going to be continuing the tradition of doing it every 5 rounds. This list has definitely changed quite a fair bit since the last time I did this list, and it's not going to be just what the ladder says. There are quite a few differences you'd be able to see from this list and the ladder. So I think it's probably about time we get into this video. There's not really much more to say, so we'll get into the 18th ranked team in just a moment. The 18th spot on this list is probably the least controversial spot. I've been saying all year that the Eagles are the worst team, but they finally have at least started to show some level of competitiveness, and the Roos just aren't. I mean, 1 win, 13 losses. They're on a percentage of 52.2%. I don't need to say much more. Let's just move on, because North Melbourne are terrible. In 17th spot, we've got the Eagles now, and while they have started to show that they can be competitive over the last few weeks, they had a not awful loss against Adelaide. It was still 5 goals, but it wasn't awful. Then they really took it up to Geelong, only losing by 3 goals. Then they finally got a win against Essendon, who played absolutely terrible, but they still got the win. And I feel like a few people are starting to almost overrate the Eagles now. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I mean, let's not forget, even though the Eagles now have 1 more win than North Melbourne, they're still pretty bad. Like, they are still among some of the worst teams in recent history, unless they could maybe pull together a few more wins, which is possible, but I still see them not winning. Maybe they'll win 1 or 2 more games for the rest of the year, but they're still a very bad football side this year, and while they're definitely better than North Melbourne now, they're still not good. In 16th spot now, we have Essendon, and well, yeah man, the bottom 4 this year really is just awful. I can't remember there being a bottom 4 this bad since, like, well, back when Gold Coast and GWS were in their first 2 years, and then we also had Melbourne, who were just terrible back then. Obviously they're a bit better now, but yeah, this bottom 4 really isn't good at all. Most years this Essendon team would probably be a wooden spoon winning team, but not this year. This year there's actually remarkably 2 teams worse than them, which really says a lot. Luckily, at least up the top end there are a few better teams, but yeah, down the bottom it's pretty bad this year. Rounding out the bottom 4 now, we have Hawthorn, who, while still not a very good football side, I think they're miles ahead of the 3 teams I have below them. Look, perhaps a bit unlucky. There's a few teams that I probably could have put in 15th. Adelaide and GWS I also could have put in this spot, but I've decided to go with Hawthorn because they've lost, like, what, 8 of their last 9 games now. They've lost their last 4. Some competitive results in between there. Also some really uncompetitive results. They're really up and down. They can't seem to string together 4 quarters of footy. They're in a rebuild. I don't think they're going too bad with that rebuild, and like I said, they are clearly better than the bottom 3 sides this year. It'll be the bottom 3 is set. Who takes up the final spot in the bottom 4 will be up for grabs from 3 teams, including Hawthorn, but yeah, they're clearly better than the bottom 3. I think that needs to be said. Up next, we have the first deviation from the actual ladder. On the real ladder, Adelaide are sitting 13th because of their recent big win over North Melbourne. Yeah, Adelaide, they've been alright this year. They probably should have won a couple more games than they have. They had a couple of really close results that could have gone their way at the start of the year, and their inaccuracy in front of goals has probably cost them a couple of games as well, like that game against St Kilda. And they could have been more competitive against Geelong and Gold Coast if they kicked accurately. But yeah, their rebuild is tracking nicely, I feel. Their two most recent wins have come against the two bottom-ranked sides, but they got pretty substantial wins against both those teams, more so against North Melbourne and West Coast. But look, I think because their two most recent wins have come against lower ranked sides, I've put them one spot lower than what they actually are. And look, they've been competitive without being brilliant. Their intensity is good. Some of their skill levels are pretty poor, obviously in front of goal in particular. But yeah, I think their rebuild is tracking nicely. Darcy Fogarty seems to be starting to hit a really good patch of form, and he could propel them to a few more wins in the back half of the season. Next up, in 13th place, I've got the GWS Giants. This team was absolutely woeful at the start of the year. They just were really irrelevant, it had to be said. But they've shown some signs of improvement since Leon Cameron left and Mark McVeigh took over as caretaker coach. They've gotten a few good wins, and they've been competitive in most of their losses as well. In fact, I think pretty much since Mark McVeigh has taken over, they've been competitive in all of their games. They've had some standout, brilliant performances by Toby Green. He's been pretty good this year, and he hasn't got into any trouble like he normally does. So yeah, that's good for GWS. How long that'll last, we don't know, because you just feel like he'd probably have to snap eventually, because he's been like that all his career. But if he does stay out of trouble, then he could be a very, very good player and a very, very important player for them in the back half of the year and going to next year as well, as they probably try and push for finals again. But yeah, GWS, gonna rank them one spot higher than they are on the actual ladder, because I feel like they've come up against some tougher opposition than the Crows have recently. Now, starting off with all of the teams that realistically from here can actually make finals. Of those teams, I think the Power is the worst. Not that they're bad. And they did just get a win against the Gold Coast Suns, but they're just a little bit too inconsistent for me. And their poor start probably... They can't really do much wrong for the rest of the year if they want to make finals, although they have been very good in the last couple of weeks, but again, quite inconsistent. Before that Swans win and the Suns win, they were pretty much win-loss for the past 5 or 6 weeks, and I think they've shown a little bit more consistency in the last couple of weeks, but I just don't rate them quite as high as the other finals aspirants. In 11th spot now, I've got a team that just beat Port Adelaide, but I'm still going to rank them higher. They are high on the actual ladder. They're in 11th, Port are 12th, and Gold Coast have definitely been more consistent over the last month, really, probably a bit more than a month too, whereas Port most certainly haven't, apart from the last couple of weeks. The Suns, they could definitely drop off at the end of the season. It's hard to really trust them too much with their history of just completely fading out in the later parts of seasons, especially with all of the season-ending injuries that they've had. They've just been cursed this year. So I am going to rate Gold Coast higher for now, but I have a feeling that probably won't be the case next Power Rankings video. And they could very easily slip out of the finals race in the next couple of weeks if they don't bring back that consistency. Got a lot of talent, but I feel like this year's not their year to make finals, unfortunately. In 10th spot now, we've got a team that is absolutely fallen off the face of the earth. Last power rankings video I had them 4th, so, and now I've got them 10th. They're 10th on the actual ladder. They've just completely collapsed the Saints. 3 losses in a row. Their loss to Brisbane wasn't so bad. Their loss to Essendon, that was pretty bad. And but everyone thought, you know what, it's just a one-off bad loss. They should bounce back and at least be competitive the following week. And they just dished up a load of absolute garbage against the Swans. They were completely uncompetitive. It was an unattractive brand of footy. They just couldn't get anything going. They just pretty much bombed it long and high inside 50. I mean, there was one kick from Ben Long where it literally looked like he didn't even know where he was kicking it to. He just bombed an absolute mongrel high up in the air, and then it just got so easily cut off. Paddy McCartan and Tom McCartan had a field day just intercepting every ball that came into the Saints forward line. Max King did absolutely nothing, got completely shut down. And now they're 10th. And Saints fans went from thinking top 4 potentially to we're not even going to make finals. So yeah, they've just completely fallen off the face of the earth. Can they turn things around? I don't know. Rounding out the bottom 10 now, I've got the Western Bulldogs. They have started to find some form in recent weeks, but their defence is still very shaky, and even though they are currently in the top 8, I just don't quite rate them as much as the teams I have in the bottom part of the top 8 on this power rankings list. They have got a very tough fixture coming up, so I mean, I still believe they can make finals. I did tip them at the midway point of the season to make finals, but right now, I don't think they're quite good enough to be in the top 8. Perhaps if they get a strong win against the Lions this week, that'll change my mind, but for now, I think Doggies are ranked 9th. In the 8th spot now, I have Richmond. On the actual ladder, they're 9th. However, I feel like they have been very convincing over the last few weeks. They could have very easily won that game against Geelong, only going down by 3 points. And they got the win over the Blues the week before, and the Blues are going very well right now. And they've in all of their losses I could think of recently, they've been really super competitive, like that one against the Swans, and they've had some really compelling victories, and I feel like they have that consistency that they didn't really have in the first part of the season, and currently I think they're a top 8 worthy team, so I'll have them in 8th. In 7th place now, we have a team that has really risen up out of nowhere this year. They've won their last 5 games, Collingwood. I've been holding off on calling them a top 8 team or contenders this year, but I mean, they've just been brilliant over the last month. They've had wins against Melbourne, most recently GWS, Fremantle. Look, they're doing everything you could ask as a Collingwood fan, and I mean, how long will their winning streak continue on for? I don't know. Will they get the W this week against Gold Coast and make it 6 in a row? Who knows? They could win many more and potentially maybe push themselves up the ladder even more. In 6th spot now, I have the Sydney Swans, who are in the same spot as I had them last power rankings video. I feel like they're definitely better than the other teams below them, but they're just not quite consistent enough to be moved up. That loss against Port Adelaide still, even though they backed it up with a really convincing, strong percentage boosting win over the Saints, I feel they can have those lapses and really poor performances every once in a while, and I mean, they're just not quite a top 5 or top 4 team just yet. In 5th place now, I've got a team that arguably could be put in the top 4 for this list, but Carlton, on the actual ladder, they're 5th. And, I mean, the top 5 this year, I feel like, is probably the 5 teams that could realistically win a premiership. Sydney and every team below them, I don't think really are any chance at all at winning a premiership, but these top 5 teams, I think, actually have a genuine chance at the premiership. Whether they're actually contenders or pretenders, we'll find out come the last few rounds of the season and finals time. But yeah, I mean, Carlton, they've been absolutely ravaged by injuries, and if it weren't for the fact that they've probably been the second worst affected team by injuries apart from West Coast this year. They basically have no key defenders left, like Jacob Wiedering, Liam Jones retired at the start of the year, Zach Williams, their halfback flanker. They've just had so many injuries through the back line. Mark Pitnet's been out for most of the season now, their main ruckman. Harry Mackay missed a few weeks. I could name so many more. Caleb Marchbank, bloody Sam Durden, their mid-season draft recruit. Oscar McDonald's out for the season. They've just had so many injuries, and if it weren't for that, they'd probably be top 2 right now, honestly. They are pretty good, but injuries have caused them to falter a little bit, although they just did get a win against Fremantle, and a pretty good one too. So, look, if they start getting some players back, then maybe they could make a push for top 4, but for now I have them as my 5th best team. Kicking off the top 4 now, I've got a team that has slipped a little bit since my last power rankings. Brisbane, I thought they were probably the second best team for most of the year, but their defence as of late has been really, really shaky. They've been conceding big scores. Even in a couple of their wins, they conceded pretty big scores. In terms of actual talent they have in their back line, Daniel Rich, Darcy Gardner, bloody Harris Andrews, Marcus Adams. It's not a bad backline, but I feel like their system is just, it's almost too offensive, too reliant on attack, and it leaves them vulnerable. It makes it for some good footy to watch, so I mean, I wouldn't mind if they continued on that attacking brand of footy, but it probably isn't going to help them out with their chances of winning a premiership, to be honest. Maybe they really turn it up in the back part of the season and start kicking some really big scores and getting some really big wins. That'll need to start off with a win against the Bulldogs at the Gabba this weekend, but I have them in 4th. In the 3rd spot now, I've got a team that is, they've just been reliable all season, really. They've pretty much been winning every game they really were tipped to, they were supposed to win. And, I mean, they've been doing a pretty decent job at getting some big wins on the board. Yeah, Geelong, I mean, there's nothing overly special about them. They're just reliable, they keep on getting the job done. They're a consistent team, almost impossible to beat at GMHBA, and they just keep on getting wins on the board. I feel like there's not really much to say about Geelong. In 2nd place now, maybe a bit of a controversial one, especially seeing that on the actual ladder Fremantle are 4th, but I think Fremantle, despite their most recent loss, they're still the 2nd best team in the competition. Look, they're just, I mean, they have improved, not out of sight, but I think most people probably thought they'd improve this year, but not to this level. They are one of the genuine premiership threats this year. Look, people thought they may have been pretenders after those couple of bad losses against Gold Coast and Collingwood, but sometimes you need bad patches of... I mean, every premiership winning team's going to have at least one bad patch of form, or one really bad game. So, I mean, a couple of bad losses in a row, if you can turn it around pretty quickly, doesn't do any harm. They did just lose to Carlton, but I think you're not going to win every game against the top side. It's not like they've been losing every game to the top sides. They've won the majority of the games they've played against the top 8 teams, the top teams. So I think they could genuinely win a premiership this year. They're not the best team, but well, they're the second best team in my eyes, despite being 4th on ladder, and I think most people would probably still agree. Alright, finishing off the power rankings list. In first place, probably no surprises here, I've got the Melbourne Demons. A few shaky losses in a row, a few pretty bad losses that they just couldn't seem to score, but all of that seemed to be fixed against Brisbane. They absolutely annihilated Brisbane. They got back on top of the ladder, and I mean, they've cemented their place as the best team in the league still. So I think they'll probably continue on that form for the rest of the year. Maybe only lose 1 or 2 more games for the season and finish top of the ladder. And they're well set for a second premiership in a row. They could very well be at the beginning of a dynasty right now. Yeah, they're just the best team in the league, and I think it's not overly controversial to say that. Alright guys, so that'll wrap up this video for today. As always, feel free to comment down below your thoughts on my list of power rankings, what you would change yourself if you did this list, and also please do consider subscribing if you haven't already, and please leave a like on this video as well, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.